All right, so last time we worked on the registration form. So this time we're going to be working on the login form. So we're going to use a couple of dependencies which will handle our login sessions and our actual login authentication itself, but we're going to code all that manually. We're just going to use it as a bit of a dependency. So let's start off by going into our login route. So I'm going to go to non-authenticated routes, login right there. Okay, so what we're needing is a post for that. Let's save that. Let's actually run nodemon server.js. Cool. There we go. I thought that was not going to connect to the database then, but it did. Okay, so with our post here, rather than doing our normal request response that we want to use some middleware called Passport, which is going to handle our authentication. So we're going to go back to our server file, wherever that one went, and we're going to split U, say up. Oh, no, close pane. Okay, there we go. So now we want to install our Passport dependency. Go add that into our dependencies. Passport is equal to require our passport. Okay, now we're going to need our authentication, our passport config. So we're going to go down here, authentication, passport config is equal to require. Now we're going to need to create that. It's going to come into our server, create authentication / passport config.js. Cool. All right, let's get rid of you for now. Back into here, we want to require that. Authentication, passport config, and now let's start that up. So we're going to say passport config, and we're going to pass it through the passport variable. And that's kind of with an error because passport isn't giving anything back. So let's create that passport config, passport config is equal to the passport that we are pulling through from our other screen. And then we're going to export that. Module.exports is equal to passport config. Go, and that is fine. Okay, so what we're going to do first of all is we're going to say our passport.use. Just want to use our passport. And we want to use a strategy, and these strategies are how you want to log in. You want to log in with local strategy, which we're going to use. So we're going to store all of our credentials here, or we want to log in using Google or Amazon or AWS or something like that. So, but we want to use a local strategy. So we can say npm I passport local. So we can import that strategy. We don't want the whole thing, we just want the strategy for it. Cool. Wow, alright, snap function. No. Okay, because we're not actually using it properly there. Okay, so inside here we want to call a new local strategy. And the first thing we're going to want to do is we're not pulling in a username from a username field in the generic sense. We're going to be getting people to sign in with their email address. So we actually want to say our username field is going to be our email address. All right. The next thing we want to do is pass through the function that's actually going to do our authentication. So we're going to call that authenticate user. So let's create that function. Authenticate user is equal to, and it's going to pull in our email, our password, and a done function. There we go. Why are you still erroring out? Is this supposed to be a function? Nope. Alright, let's check this out. Okay, it is because that is not a function. So let's save that again. That is fine. Alright, nice. So the first thing we're going to want to do is pull in our users. So let's bring in a database model. So there's our users. So yeah, the first thing we want to do is pull in our users based on our email address. So we're going to say const user is equal to await users.find1, and we want to find that user by its email address. Because we're using await, it needs to be an asynchronous function. Now we can start our checks. Okay. So first check we want to do is if the user exists. So we can say if there's no user, we didn't find any user, we want to return our done function just to finish this whole authentication. In that done, we want to say null because it's not pulling in any errors, false because it's not pulling in any users, and then we want to have a message. We'll just call that message invalid user for now. The next check we want to do is to say if the user is active. So user.active. So if the user is inactive, we want to return that done function. So again, no errors, no users, and a message of user deactivated. Cool. Let's just clean that up a little bit. Okay, the last one is if the user's password isn't correct. So for that, we're going to need another dependency. Oh, we've already installed bcrypt, so we just need to pull it in. Bcrypt is equal to require our bcrypt. So now we can say if bcrypt.compare sync the user.password is not the same as password, then we want to return done with null, false, and the message of invalid password. Alright, let's clean this up again. Cool. Right, we can add a lot more checks in there later. Okay, so if it passes those checks, if the user exists, the user is active, and the user password is correct, then we can call that done function again with no errors and the user. Cool. Save that, make sure there's no errors. Nice. So the next thing we wanted to do is add a serialization for that user and deserialization for the user. So we're going to say passport.serialize user. We're going to pull in two things, being the user itself and that done function. And if it's good, we're going to call done with no errors and the user's ID. Just in case we have two users with the same name, we want to pull through the ID and not the username. Now we want to deserialize the user. Serialization is used for login, and the deserialization is used for logging out. So the serialization will pull in the user by their ID and store it in our session. Then when we deserialize, it'll look for that user's ID to log them out. So we're going to pull through that ID and done. And we're going to call done with no errors, and we want to search for the user by the ID. So we're going to say await users.find1 by the ID. because we're using that await, we need to make that asynchronous. Cool. So that's it for authentication. We're going to add more to that later, but that's nice and basic for now. All right, the next thing in our routes, back into our login route, we're going to require that passport. So const passport is equal to require passport. Okay, so for our post, we actually want to say passport.authenticate. We want to authenticate with a local strategy and pass through some options. The first one is successful redirect. So if it's successful, we want to redirect to the dashboard. If it fails, we want to redirect to our login screen. And if it does fail, we want to have a failure message. And that is all that we need for that. So over here, we do need to add a few extra things. So let's install 2 more dependencies, and that's going to be express flash for that message and express session to store our active sessions. So now we can bring those in there. Const flash is equal to require flash. Const session is equal to require express session. I forgot to add express onto that flash. So now we want to add these into our app.use. So we're going to say flash. Our next one is session. Now session is going to throw some deprecation errors because we need to add a couple of things into there. The first one is secret, and that secret is going to be a cipher to encrypt passwords. I'm just going to open that up on the side. That cipher is going to be in our environmental variables. And I don't want to show the environmental videos on live stream, on environmental variables in live stream, because that's a big security issue, so we're not going to do that. .env, cool. All right. And call it session secret and give it a cipher. All right. Let's save that. Really, that cipher can be anything, but I've created a couple of ciphers previously, especially for this. Something I did forget to mention, our database that we're using for this is our UAT database. So this isn't actually what we're going to be using in production. When we're happy with it, we will push it to production, but this is the database we're going to use for all of our testing. All right, so let's continue. So we want to pull in that secret, which I called session secret, which was part of our process.env.session secret. The next two things are resave, which we don't need because it's deprecated, and save unlimitalized, which is also false because it's deprecated. Save that, and that is good. The next thing we need to do is bring in our passport and initialize it. Last thing we need is our passport.session. So it's actually going to pull in the session from our express sessions. And that should be it. We should be able to log in successfully now. Let's give that a test, and we'll test our failures first. Bring that over there. Local, let's go to our login. And we have nothing on our login, so we haven't actually finished yet. So let's go back to our client, non-authenticated routes, and login. Let's create this. So let's say our form /login with a method of post. Create our tables, tr, th, label of email. 2D with an input of email, with a name of email, and make sure that's required. Cool, let's copy you, paste you there, and we want to make this one password, and we want to put in our button, th button or submit, and call it login. Nice. Refresh you, there you are. Let's add styling. Let's just get the same styling from our register page. What did we forget for the button? Col span. Col span equals 2. There it is. Now the other thing we need to do is add our area for our messages, just in case. We got a failure, so let's put that into there. Refresh that, make sure we have no errors. Cool, no errors. Something else. No, we'll leave that for now. Okay, so let's give it an incorrect email address and incorrect password. So right now, we'll just bring up our passport config. There it is. So if we're looking at it right now, it's going to come in here, it's going to pull the user, and it's going to say if the user was found. Right there, user invalid because the user wasn't found. Next, our user is active, so that won't really matter. Actually, let's change that active to false, just to test that. Okay, so right now our user has been set as inactive. So let's type in a user that does exist, and that user was basic@user.com. Basic@user.com, and I'm pretty sure the password was basic. Right there, we're coming up. User is deactivated. Cool. Now let's change this back to true to activate it. We're going to create a GUI so we don't have to go into the actual database all the time. We'll manage all this through our settings on the website. Okay, so now let's try that again, but with an incorrect password. So we're going to say basic@user.com, incorrect password, incorrect password. All right, so now let's try it, making sure it works. Because right there we did the user, the active, and the password. Now we're going to type in the actual stuff. Basic@user.com, password of basic, login, and we're coming up incorrect. I actually think that's because I have these around backwards again. So let's get rid of you and say user.password. Let's try that again. User basic@user.com. It's basic. There we go. Okay, so that logged in to the dashboard page successfully. That's exactly what we wanted. Okay, so we do have, we might as well do it quickly now. So now we've had a login, we also want to have a logout. So let's just throw that into there. All right, so go away. And inside our layout, we want it inside of our layout, partials menu. So this we're going to do a little bit different. We're not going to create an anchor tag for this. We're actually going to create a form. And in that form, we're going to have a / logout, !_ method equals delete. And then our method is going to be equal to post. The reason for this is because the way Google's Spider works, Search Spider, is it's going to go through every single link on a web page and click on every single link and bring up every single response that it possibly can to have in its search. If we have our logout button as a link, just say you're logged in and somebody searches Google for the page, it's going to log us out because it's going to hit all those links for us. So if we make it into a form, it won't do that. And the reason why we're adding this onto the end, making sure it's delete, is because we don't want people to be able to create a post request, essentially, and we're going to make a delete request, and a delete request isn't part of the normal request string, so we're going to add that with a dependency called method override. So I'll explain that as we're creating it. But yeah, essentially we're creating our own request called delete, because we want to delete that session. So let's create our button, submit, and call it logout. There we go. Let's just see that that's popped up there. is our logout button. We can always style that to look the same as everything else. Okay, so let's go back into our routes. Actually, let's make that a login with a method of delete. So we can actually add it to our login route. Now, you know what? I don't like that because we're going to login is going to be for non-authenticated users, but we want logout to be an authenticated user. So logout, there we go. We'll create that separately. We can just throw that straight into the index right there. So let's throw this down here. Router.route logout. I'm going to call delete. We're going to have request and response. Now inside this, we already have our logout function stored in our request. So we're going to say request.logout, and this is actually requiring a callback function. So we're running the callback, and what we want to do is once we've logged out, we're going to say response.redirect. Let's just redirect them to the home page once they've logged out. So the next thing we want to do is install a dependency called method override, so we can actually use delete, because at the moment delete doesn't exist. So let's say npm method override. Okay, so let's include that. Const method override equal to require method override. We're going to want to add that in here, which will be our method override, and we want to use underscore method for that. So that's exactly what we've done inside here. So we're calling logout, we're adding an extra field to our logout, and we're going to say underscore method, and that's what it's looking for right here. It's looking for that underscore method, and it's calling the delete method. So essentially it's been sent as post, but then it's going to be changed to delete. So when it's looking for that logout, it's looking for logout, then method override is going to be called right here as a middleware, and it's going to change the method to delete, which is that one. And that is pretty much it. So let's give that one a go. So we'll refresh you, we'll go home, and we need a way to see whether we're logged in or not. Okay, let's just throw into, all right, let's go to our page config or our middleware page config. Let's also add into there, just for now, let's say response.locals.username is equal to, no, that won't work because it's going to be pulled in before that. Okay, let's do this. It's going to come up with an error, but that error is going to say that it's working correctly. Save yes. Let's go into our dashboard. So that was in Authenticated Routes dashboard, and let's say, we need to actually add that. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to add the user variable to every single, should already be added for that, but we want to add it to the locals. Okay, so we want to add that. So let's say, essentially what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add the user variable available to the local variables for every single page. I'm going to add that as a middleware. So let's call that user.inits.js. And now we're going to say middleware function, say const user init equal to an anonymous function, and then we're going to return request, response, and next. There we are, and then we want to export that. Exports module.exports is equal to user init. Okay, so by this stage, Passport would have already put the user into the request. We want to put that user into our response.locals. So we can just say response.locals.user is equal to request.user. Actually, let's make a check for this, because if somebody's not logged in, that will error out. So let's say if request.user, okay, so if there is no user on that request, we want to say response dot, this isn't going to work, we have to use this as a ternary operator. Okay, ternary operator is essentially giving two different options to a variable, so that's what we're going to do. So we're going to say response.locals.user is equal to, now just think of this as an if statement, so we're going to say if request.user does not exist, then we're going to do this. So we're going to send through null. Let's just say null. So there's no user for it. Okay. If there is a request.user, we want to give it request.user. Then we want to call next. So essentially think of this as an if-else statement. So we want to put something into that variable right there, request locals user. And then we're saying if the user isn't there, we want null to go into that. If it is there, we want request.user to go into there, and then we're calling next. Okay, now we need to bring that into here. Where's our middleware there? Const user init is equal to require middleware user init. Let's just clean that up a little bit. Okay, I don't like that. Let's actually do that. Yeah, that looks a little bit better. Okay, now we need to bring that into here. So we're going to say user init. Cool. So now let's refresh here, make sure that we don't get any errors. No errors. Perfect. So essentially what it's going to do is every time we go to a different page, it's going to check whether there's a user that's been logged in. If they have, it's going to save that as a variable. Now let's throw that into the layout. So let's come into our layouts. And inside here, let's just say users dot full name. Refresh it. Coming up null. That is annoying. Why are you not working? Because you should be null. Okay, so let's do this one. Let's say if user dot full name. Okay, so if there's a user logged in, we want to put their full name there. If there's not, we want to say not logged in. Save that. There we go, not logged in. Let's throw a page break in there. Just to break that up a little bit. Okay, cool. So we're not logged in, home there, not logged in, dashboard, not logged in. Cool. So, oh, that's something that's a bit of a bug right there. All right, let's just fix that quickly while we're looking at it. So that was in our register and our login. So we're going to register. I know it's in our, up here. Register right there. So rather than saying button, let's say dot submit button. So we're going to make that a class, and we'll give that a class down here. Class is submit button. Cool. So we'll just copy you to the login. I'm going to add that in there. So class equals submit button. Cool. Let's fix that login up. Okay, so now let's log in. We're still not logged in. Basic@user.com. Basic. There we go. And now it's coming up basic user rather than not logged in. We're going to log out. User is not defined. Why is that doing that now? Because we are logged out. That should be fine. Well, this is fun. All right, so let's just try to change this. All right. maybe it's looking for a user when there isn't one. So let's have this go the other way. So if there's not a user, it'll see that one and it won't try to look for a user. So now let's say user dot full name. Let's try that now. Resend. No. Okay, if we actually look here, there is that, and it's not redirecting to our login page. Okay, I just paused there for a minute trying to work out what the issue was, and the issue was that I hadn't created the page config for it. So I've just done that now for the route, and we are fine. So we still have not logged in, login, basic at user.com, basic for the password. We're logged in, it's basic user. We've got log out, logs out, and we're gone now. Okay, cool. We'll just leave it at that, and then the next one we're going to do a little bit of authentication as well, because we don't want to be able to go to the dashboard page if we're not logged in, and we don't want to go to the login or register page if we are already logged in. And we also want to throw in there that as a bit of extra safety, we don't want to view those if we're not logged in. Oh, sorry, we don't want to view log out and dashboard if we are not logged in, and we don't want to view these two when we are logged in, so we'll get rid of those. So lastly, we'll just remove that. Cool, and that's it.